Chapter 11. I saw Russell no more that day, and for a while the animals made me forget I was not welcome. I enjoyed the curious nosing of the piglets, who came to see if I had something for them, then the goats and the horse, who apparently wanted to be sure I hadn't given the pigs anything. I had nothing to give but Russell's store of corn, and I knew better than to bother that. At twilight, the goats and horse lay down in the pasture, the chickens hurried off to their coop, and one by one the pigs trailed up the ramp into their house. Since marrying Jamie, I'd spent my days alone, but he'd always been with me at night. With the animals at rest, the ridge was so quiet I could hear the trills of insects, a light rustling of air in the trees, and the drip of water in the trough. Jamie was right. Lodging in the corn crib was better than being cooped in a stuffy boarding house. Its screen door could not be locked from the inside, but I pushed one of the barrels against the door before lying down on our blanket, telling myself it was only a precaution against bears. My night was undisturbed, and in the morning I woke to the scent of coffee. I didn't expect there would be any for me. I peeled and ate an egg with a torn-off end of the bread, then hurried off to the outhouse. Later that morning, I saw Russell bent over on the other side of the garden fence. I saw him one more time walking into the woods. That day, which I imagined to be Jamie's first day of work in the camp, I used buckets in the corn crib to carry water from the trough for washing our clothes, then spread them on the low tin roof of the pig pen, where they dried quickly. In the afternoon, I sat under a tree in the pasture and thought about homey things like cooking implements and bright curtains for the windows of my new house. Not far away, the pigs stretched on their sides, tame as dogs. I thought about all the things Jamie and I would have in our new home. Maybe he'd find a place like Russell's, with room for animals but close to town. The next morning, a small covered bucket waited on the corn crib step. Lifting the cover, I found 4 yellow-green summer apples, bruised from their fall, but soft and sweet. I saved the seeds and gave the core of my first apple to the horse, holding it in the flat of my hand so his teeth wouldn't catch my fingers. That day, I didn't see Russell at all. In the hottest part of the afternoon, the chickens dusted their feathers in the dry dirt beneath the corn crib. Like the animals, I sought the cooler air and shade of the woods. The 3 days without Jamie passed peacefully and more quickly than I'd imagined. I washed my hair and dried it in the sun, then spent a lot of time braiding it and wrapping it around my head, thinking of Margaret. I hoped my uncle would make a home for them in a place as nice as this. He'd told us nothing about North Dakota, so I didn't know if it was all mountains and trees, like West Virginia, or broad valleys and low hills, like Ohio. I needed to write and tell them where they could send letters. Uncle Bert might not write, but Margaret would. Too late, I wished I'd written about our change of place while we were in Jennytown. I needed paper and a writing pen, and so many things, most of all, shoes. Jamie needed shoes, too. Every day since leaving my family, the new places of our travel had left me feeling lost and uneasy. But on Saturday, when Jamie returned to take me from his brother's farm, I knew I was near the end of my journey. We had a home, and soon I'd see it. He was dusty and scratched and wore a new pair of hobnail boots he called corkers. "Pack up. I want to get there before dark," he said. Our valises were packed and ready, and I'd saved him an egg and most of the beefsteak. He opened a new but worn canvas knapsack, and I put the last of our food in it. I waited at the edge of the woods while he went to the house to say a word to his brother. "Thank him for the apples," I said. He returned in a minute, then we started through the woods. You'll see," he said, when I asked where we were going and what our new place was like. He was tired, I could tell, for he'd worked half of that day and trekked a long way to Russell's. We went back to the road by the creek, but soon turned up a half-hidden path that circled up, down, and around through darkening woods, stepping over fallen limbs and sloshing through wet places, hidden under the leaves. He would not let us stop to rest, though we'd left Russell's hours before nightfall. The woods became quite dark, while light was still visible above the treetops. Just at twilight, we came out to a patch of broom grass surrounded on 3 sides by woods. "Here we are," he said, walking me around the clearing. There was a fenced garden, an outhouse, and 2 tumble-down sheds, one that might be a chicken house. A small stone building was set partly into the hillside. Our spring house, Jamie said. I pointed to a wooden structure near the open edge of the clearing. Is that a house? That's it. He left everything, Jamie said. Who? The old feller. There's a couple of chickens and some stuff in the garden. He took off with no more than the clothes on his back soon as he saw my money. The old man's eagerness to leave did not make me feel certain Jamie had made a good purchase. He walked me through the grass to the front of the cabin, and there the view took my breath. On the open side of the clearing, the land sloped sharply down, and in the distance, the sun was about to drop behind hills that seemed far below our feet. There's a railroad track, I said, going closer and shading my eyes to see the narrow railroad track through the sunset glare. The track ran just at the edge of the clearing, close to a drop-off, a stone's throw from the front of the cabin. It's for the logs, goes to the camps, Jamie said. He thought our new home was complete, but I needed one more thing. Are there neighbors? Not for miles, he said. Ain't that a relief? No neighbors, no pleasant friend. But your work is nearby. Up the mountain a ways. The log trains and supply trains goes up and down. You can set your clock by 'em. I had no clock. So you'll ride the train to work and back? The logs is sent down before my workday is done, but I'll get here. You can bet on it. Every night I can, and always on Saturday. He set down the valises and took my hand. Come take a look at all the stuff we got. I stood on the small porch, studying the rotted edges of the floorboards while Jamie went inside and lit a lamp. By the light, I saw the single room, the heavy table in the middle, a cast-iron stove in one corner, and a bed in the other. Implements hung on the walls. Something smells bad, I said. Jamie held the lamp below the bed and pulled out a chamber pot. It's full, he said. I'm sorry, I should have... He carried the pot outside, but the odor remained, and I suspected it might be the bed. Let's sleep out tonight, I said when he returned with the rinsed pot. He agreed. Tomorrow we'd make everything clean as new. Early Sunday morning, Jamie pulled the mattress sack outside, cut it open, and dumped the rotten straw in a heap in the woods. I made a fire in the cook stove, boiled the mattress sack, and hung it across the garden fence. While I carried water to the cabin and scrubbed every surface I could reach, Jamie sharpened a rusty scythe and cut down the clearing's tall grass for our new bedding. The cut grass smelled wonderfully fresh, but I doubted there would be enough for a mattress. Dried grass was not thick like wheat straw. We'll buy straw in Winkler, Jamie said. Maybe I can bring it up on the supply train. When will that be? Next week, maybe. I'll have to see. A horse could carry it, I said, thinking of Russell's horse. But Jamie said we'd seen enough of Russell for a while. I suppose that really meant Russell had seen enough of us. The old man had left his kitchen and garden implements, a bit of oil for his lamp and lantern, a tin of musty-smelling cornmeal, a pint jar of dried beans, and a covered crock of flour with bugs in it. I tossed the flour and its bugs to the hens. I'd counted 3 hens, all keeping their distance. Behind the shed there was a chopping stump, a hatchet and an axe, and maybe enough wood to fire the stove for a week. The old man had laid up no wood for the winter. We needed so many things. First of all, something to eat, since Jamie had finished the beef stick. He'd found a small nest of eggs when he cut down the grass. I cracked them separately because even in their shells some smelled rotten. Out of 6 eggs in the nest, only 2 were fresh enough to eat, but I crawled under the half-collapsed doorway and got into the chicken house, where I found 2 others. In the old man's weedy garden, I found 2 split heads of cabbage and the hills of his potato patch. I dug into one of the potato hills with a kitchen fork and brought out 7 potatoes about the size of eggs. While I was doing that, I heard a squawk, and when I carried my produce back to the cabin, I found Jamie plucking the feathers of one of the hens. I was sorry he'd killed the hen, but he said it was old and probably had stopped laying, and we could buy young hens in town. But when? He had to return to the camp the next morning. Point me in the right direction and I'll go to the store for a few things tomorrow, I said. No, that wouldn't be smart, he said. You'd easy get lost. There's no road, just the railroad track and the path through the woods. Does it take long to get there? A few hours. The path is quicker. It's a lot like the trail to Russell's. Not bad walking, going down, but not so easy coming back. Saturday we'll go together. Late Sunday afternoon, I saw my first train chug past the cabin. It carried strapped-down crates and one flat car of men sitting back to back, their legs hanging over the sides. They waved, and Jamie raised his hand and gave a nod. I asked, "Do you know them?" "A few," he said. After that, he had a worried look to him. I wondered if the men on the train had homes and families in Winkler. I didn't ask because he seemed tired of questions about that town. I boiled the chicken and potatoes for our supper, and that night we slept in the cabin with our blanket as a pad over the rusty bed springs. Several hours before Monday's dawn, Jamie got up to leave for work. He hugged me tight in the open doorway. "If I can come, I'll be home before dark. If you don't see me, don't worry. Likely we've worked late, and I'll see you the next night. You'll be safe here." The moon was still in the sky when he walked away, up the railroad track and out of sight.